Good afternoon, everyone. Craig Kiger, Minnesota DNR Outreach, and today's episode is 181, Gathering Seed and Cone for the Minnesota State Forest Nursery Program. If you'll take a look down in the lower right-hand corner, you can click on the ellipses and find the Q&A function. You can find your multimedia viewer if you'd like to use that. Today's presentation is kind of where I started my journey in conservation. I'm a graduate of the Northland Community College. Back then it was just Itasca Community College in the forestry program. And we took a tour of the Badura Nursery. So it's kind of coming around full circle here for me. Today's speaker is going to be Sarah Ebert. And Sarah is our nursery manager at the Badura Nursery just outside of Akeley, Minnesota. So Sarah, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
All right. So I have managed the nursery here in Akeley for about 3 years now. I also take care of the nursery General Andrews over in Willow River. That's mainly for seed production at this point. At the nursery in Akeley, we grow bare root seedlings for reforestation efforts. And the seed for those seedlings comes from the public. So those cones come into the nursery, we clean them and plant the seeds and then send the bare root seedlings back out to the state of Minnesota. And we have, I want to say 10 or 11 full-time staff here. And then in our busy season, sometimes we'll have over 100 folks here working. So that's kind of what goes on here. I think that's it.
Great. So let's go ahead and start the presentation.
Okay. So I'll just get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about gathering seed and cone and the process that it goes through here at the nursery. There are 3 basic steps to selling cones to the nursery. There's kind of before the sell, and then during, and then after. Before you entertain picking cones for the nursery, I always recommend that you check your local forestry office or our DNR website. That's the most up-to-date place for information about what we're purchasing and how much we're purchasing it for. I also recommend that you gather all your picking materials. So that might be pruners, gloves, bags, or buckets to put the cones in. I always recommend checking regulations because some areas do have different rules on what you can collect. And then we just ask that when you are picking that you take note of where you're picking those cones because we keep track of that here at the nursery. We try to make sure that cones and seed that come into the nursery, those trees go back to the areas that the cones were harvested from. And then we do ask that the cones are clean when they do come into the nursery. We just want the cone itself. We don't want any tree parts, just the cone, no twigs or green parts. Once you're ready to sell to the nursery, we encourage you to give your local forestry office a call. They do have different times that they're taking cones throughout the week. If you're bringing it to the Badura office in Akeley, we take them every day of the week. The staff at either a forestry office or here at Badura will check the cones for quality. If we can't take anything that's rotten, doesn't have any seed in it, or if it's dirty, it's just something that we can't process. Once we've established that those cones are good cones to purchase here at the nursery, we'll measure them out by the bushel and determine how much that individual will receive in a check. We'll give you a receipt and we'll give you a check, and we will encourage you to pick more cones because we can take all the cones that we can get. And after the sale, we do encourage pickers to continue to pick. And if we do have information about picking sites, we are always game to share that information, but also local foresters and forestry offices might also have different picking locations that maybe the nursery in Akeley doesn't know about. We do have buying stations located throughout the state of Minnesota, and that information is also found on our website. We have broken the buying stations out to different seed zones. Um, and it's important, like I've mentioned, that we know where these cones are coming from. We get a lot of there's a lot of variation in the state of Minnesota, so we want to make sure that the trees that are going out of the nursery make it to their homes and they have the best survivability rate as possible. Here's a little bit of a snippet of what you can find on our website. We do collect a lot of different species, anything that's most anything that's native to Minnesota. And then we do have prices listed on our website for those. We do price adjustments as needed for each year. Um, we do take a look at how much labor and things that it takes to collect cones because I know it's not an easy process. We are always in need for red pine and black spruce and those kind of things. On our website, you can also find seed and cone collection timelines. Collection starts in June for hardwoods and in August for conifers. We will take black spruce until mid-February. Those cones are viable until then. Also, what's nice about our website is that most of our species that are listed on our website also have tip sheets. And so if you're new to picking, then that would be a great resource for you to find information out about different species that you're looking to collect. And then also you can reach out to your local forestry office and they can help you as well. But here is an example of what that tip sheet will include. So this would be tamarack. And it gives you kind of a window of when cones are ripe, what they look like, some tips about how to collect from them, and also like information of what not to pick. These are really helpful and we try to keep them up to date as much as possible. If anything's changed for us or if like phone numbers have changed, we do try to keep all of that stuff updated. We talk about seed cone quality quite a little bit. Unfortunately, we can't offer discounts for bad quality cones. I do understand that it's a lot of work to pick cones, but the reason we can't offer discounts is because we can't uniformly discount cones across the state. Everybody's interpretation of a bad cone is a little bit different. We do have guidelines, so it's just easier to create kind of a teaching moment, let you know what's good and what's bad about the cones, and then go on from there. The reasons we do that is it's a lot of wear and tear on our seed extraction equipment. We have pretty old equipment and it's just not feasible for that equipment to run through really bad cones. It also creates longer extraction times, which is unfortunate when we are trying to extract and then plant that seed right away. It kind of delays our planting, which could potentially miss our window of planting in the fall or in the spring. It is more labor intensive. And then in all reality, we're getting less seed and just more debris. And our goal is to collect as much seed as possible. A great way for pickers to check their cone quality before you come into the nursery is by doing a cut test. This is what foresters will do at buying stations, but what we want to see is 3 viable seeds per cut face. So when you cut this cone open, you're going to see a solid white texture like you see here in this red circle. That's what we're looking for. And if you cut a cone open and you're not seeing that kind of substance within the cone, then we would consider that not a viable cone. I find that really helpful in the field so you know what you're looking at and making sure you're making the most use of your time. And that can be done with a sharp knife or you can do it with a pruner. Just be careful. Some cones are a little bit tougher to cut than others. Currently, the nursery has a quite a large need for seed. Area offices have quotas that are sent from the nursery here. We're trying to restock our coolers because they're very low in inventory. This year we are looking specifically for white spruce, black spruce, white pine, jack pine, and red pine for our conifers. We don't store any of our hardwood seedlings. We don't have facilities that can store that kind of seed. So mainly we're looking for the conifer seed to store. Right now we're very low and maybe only have plantings enough for maybe 1 or 2, and ideally we would like at least 3 years worth in our cooler at any given time. And so, with that being said, not all conifers are pines, but all pines are conifers. If you're new to the collecting game, there are some little differences between different types of trees. So for like a tamarack, they have short, soft needles and they cluster in 12 or more. Balsam fir, they have flat needles with pleasant smell, smells kind of like Christmas. Spruce have sharp, short needles, so that would be that white spruce and black spruce. Pines have long needles in bundles of 2 or 5, so white pine, jack pine, red pine. And it's really important that we at the nursery can tell what kind of cones they are, but it's helpful if you can distinguish between what tree you're collecting. It's easier for us when we're sorting out cones here at the nursery. To go a little bit more in depth about tree ID, white spruce have leaves that are 1/3 to 3/4 inches long, and they have kind of a stinky odor when you crush them. Trees can get 60 to 80 feet, and then cones are around 2 inches in size. When you are collecting spruce, they are pretty sticky, so you should definitely be prepared to get a little messy during that. And then also here in the corner, the blue highlighted areas are areas where you would most likely find white spruce throughout the state. Some collection tips for white spruce. We take cones or expect them to be ripe between the 15th of August through mid-September. Green cones are ripe enough when the seed coats are dark brown to black when they're sliced open for seed inspection. Perfect ripeness for the cones is a dull green to tan in color. Some white spruce will ripen after the fact, so if it's a little bit green, it's all right. Um, it is really important to get it to the nursery or to a buying station as soon as you can. We want to make sure that the quality of the cone is preserved. So we want folks to keep those cones in a dry, cool area. And if you have the ability to kind of circulate air around the cones, that'll be the best thing for it. We don't want you to pile cones in or out of sacks or anything or plastic bags because those cones will heat up and they will mold, which will kill the seed inside the cone. And we really are just trying to preserve the cone and make sure that when you are picking that you get the most money for what you're picking. Black spruce, their leaves are about 1/4 to 1/2 inch long. They have a less pungent odor when you crush them up. Those can be anywhere from 20 to 80 feet if they're a really happy tree. Their cones are a little bit smaller. They're about 1/2 inch in size. They're usually found in boggy areas, and black spruce is usually found farther up north than kind of down in the cities area. But this is a huge species for the DNR Forestry Office. We use black spruce a lot for aerial seeding, so this is a high need all the time for us. Cone collection occurs anytime after mid-September, and they can be collected through March, depending on the quality of the cone. Those cones are kind of a purple-black when they're ripe, and they're a very firm cone. We always are suggesting to cut cones to make sure that they have the 3 sound seeds per cut face. Black spruce is kind of funny, so that's very important to do the cut test. Black spruce is also a very heavy cone once you're collecting. So if you have heavy cones, then that's also a good way to determine that those are good quality cones. Red pine, they have leaves that are 4 to 6 inches long, and they bundle in bundles of 2. Those trees can get anywhere from 60 to 80 feet tall when they're fully mature. They have kind of a reddish tint to the bark compared to a white pine. And down here in the bottom corner, you can see kind of what a red pine cone looks like. Those are kind of what a red pine cone would be, something that we're looking for here at the nursery. And the map is kind of showing where you would find red pine in the state of Minnesota. Collection tips for red pine. They're ripe now through October. They need to be 90% or more purple in color to begin collecting. Cones turn brown when they're too far gone, and they'll open and all the seed will fall out. And unfortunately, those are things that we can't take at the nursery because there's no seed in it. We ask that they're not bug infested, and then the way to determine that is if they're not bleeding any pitch or any of sappy stuff on the cone, then that would indicate that that's a good quality cone. But if it is kind of sticky or something like that, then they're not a cone that would be viable to purchase here at the nursery. These cones also heat up, so we ask that you don't stack them and make sure that there's air movement through them so that they stay dry and don't mold. In the bottom corner here is an example of cones that are not ripe yet. They're green. They're of size, but they're just not the right color yet. And the collection times can vary just a little bit. That's also a little bit weather dependent. So sometimes you might see a cone crop that is looking very promising, and then you might have a little bit of a drought or too much water from storms or cool weather, and that can cause trees to abort their seeds. And so definitely keep a lookout for that. If you see a promising cone area, but then you kind of have a weather event, then it's a possibility those cones are maybe not good anymore. Moving on to white pine, those leaves are 2.5 to 5 inches long, and they bundle in bundles of 5, the same amount of letters as white, so that's an easy way to remember it. Those trees can get up to 100 feet tall, but on average are about 80 feet. The bark is gray and furrowed on older trees. So we have some examples of what that tree looks like, and up in the top corner, kind of what a white pine cone looks like. Here's an up close picture of the white pine cones, and these would be considered good cones to collect this color. They can range anywhere from green to kind of a reddish purple. As long as those cones are closed tight, then that would mean that those are a good quality cone. Right now is kind of the time to collect them, anywhere between the end of August to the end of September. We do ask again to keep them in a cool, dry area. Immature cones kind of shrivel up and they kind of look like raisins, and we ask you not to collect those because there is no viable seed in there. So we can't take those. And then this species is also very susceptible to heat spoilage. So again, cool, dry place with air movement is ideal. Deciduous trees like acorns, we do take those. An example on the left would be what our website looks like, and all this information like the collection methods and bagging seed is also found on our website. You can hand pick from standing trees. Acorns, you can lay a tarp down and shake branches, and those can fall off on there, and it's kind of an easy collection process that way. You can use a machine called a bag-a-nut, and it basically kind of, you just push it around the yard, and that's what collects it in a bin, which you would see an example of that here at the bottom of the screen. The nursery is actually purchasing a few of those to use for our own collection methods. Also, rakes are really great. and then some things just fall on the ground, and you can collect those just by hand picking them from the ground. We do ask that acorns are put into a breathable container or a bag, because if you heat them up too much, certain species will begin to germinate before we can get them into the ground. So storage is really key for that. Ash and maple seeds, we ask to have those put into burlap bags or into paper bags to keep them kind of dry and cool. Walnuts need to be kept in open, small containers so they don't warm up as well. Again, we do ask that you label all species and date and places where it's collected. Don't overfill any container, because they'll be very heavy, but then it will also create more heat in a small area. Um, so an example of a deciduous tree would be a sugar maple. The tree ID information about that would be um, opposite branching sticks. Leaves are kind of simple, dark green on the top to pale green on the bottom. They have 5 lobes with smooth or wavy pointed edges. Um, and then when to collect would be late September to November. A ripe seed would be kind of yellowish brown. And the best way to pick this would be with a rake or a tarp. You can hand pick. But if you are raking or kind of getting things from the ground, we do ask that it's just the seed and not the sticks or any extra leaves. Things that we don't want. We prefer cones that are from several different trees versus a single tree in your yard. I do understand that some areas that's kind of all that's there, but we do ask for kind of a variety because there are a lot of different areas in the state of Minnesota. We only want cones and seed that are listed on our website. So we do see a lot of questions about Norway spruce or Scotch pines, Colorado blue spruce. Those are things that we can't take because they're not native to Minnesota, so we're not allowed to plant those and sell those from the nursery. We don't want anything that's open, dry, and has no seed in it. So that's something that we can't take. We can't take anything that has holes or they're half eaten, or in certain species that if they're last year's cones, we can tell that. Usually they're a little bit rotten when you cut them open, or they feel a little bit mushy. So that's something that we can't take. So we want to definitely encourage good quality cones coming into the nursery. And then seed and cones that are raked from the ground with leaves and sticks. So acorns you would collect from the ground, but you just want to make sure they're free of debris. So in these photos that we see, the example, this middle one, the open black spruce cones, that's an example of an open cone. They're kind of fanned out, and that's not something that we can take. And then a Colorado blue spruce is not a species that we collect here at the nursery either. Kind of to round things out, things to remember, always check our website for updated information. Our communications team does a really great job about making sure that the most important and most up-to-date information is on our website. Always check for regulations before picking. We don't want anybody to get in trouble. We only want people to have a good experience doing this. Check with your local foresters. They have a lot of information and are willing to help. That's what they're there for. No twigs or debris. Make sure that seeds and cones are stored in cool, breathable areas to make sure that nothing is molding before it can make it to us. Note where cones are being collected. And if anybody is curious what 1 bushel amounts to, on average, about 9.4 gallons would get you about a bushel. So when you're kind of thinking about what you would expect as a return on the investment of your time, that's the math you would want to use. And with that, that's kind of all I have for collecting cones for the nursery and bringing them over to us. And we are really appreciative of anybody that takes the time to collect for us. We can't do it without your help, and it is a really huge advantage for us for any help that we can get.
Nicely done, Sarah. Um, We're going to put Sarah's email contact in the chat function. So if you have a question for her, you can reach out through that Minnesota Forest Nursery.dnr at state.mn.us and ask her your question directly. So drying the cones, it looks like that's what you're doing here in this photo.
Yep.
You dry them down. When they open up, you collect the seeds through that mesh.
Yep, so we have these big square boxes. So when cones come in, we empty them out and spread them out in these big trays. And there's mesh, there's 2 layers of mesh, so it holds the cone. And then there's a smaller mesh underneath that'll collect the tiny seed. And so they'll go through this process of opening and closing several times. And during the winter, when we're extracting, we'll put them in a humidity filled room, which kind of promotes the opening and closing of cones and kind of mimics the natural process that a cone would go through.
Now, jack pine, I've always been told, is a fire dependent species. Do you have to put those in a drying oven or increase
Um,
the temperature?
Yep, we do. We have a giant oven here at the nursery that we do run those through, but you can also boil jack pine.
Oh,
So we have pots here that we'll dip jack pine into, and it'll heat it up and open it, and the cones will drop the seed that way as well. But it's a multi-step process. It's
oh yeah.
not just one time. You got to do it several times. So,
So why don't you go ahead and take your presentation down, that way the audience gets a larger view of us.
okay.
There we are. So here's your perfect chance to ask about seeding conifers and deciduous trees in Minnesota. Um, the pre-show in the back room, Sarah and I talked a little bit about other species, and wild plum was one that came up. And do people just bring you in a gunny sack full of plums and then you gotta extract the pits out of those? And
For those the only time that we've collected wild plum, it's already been cleaned
okay,
for us. Um, we can do it. It's a pretty lengthy process to
I
extract.
uh, I have planted some wild plum on my property, and Jeff talked about he did one for his yard, and they've got just an incredible sweet smell in the springtime when they're blossoming. But the grouse on my property and the deer seem to like the plums too. Um, our audience is still coming up with questions, so we'll see how that goes. Um, Here we got our first one in. Jennifer says, who generally collects bushels of cones? Loggers seem like they would be well positioned for the quantity needs. It's fascinating to see one bushel is 9.4 gallons.
So we do have pickers that work with loggers to pick cones off of their logging sites. But we do rely heavily on the public. Some area offices have picking events where they'll bring tops into their offices and kind of promote bringing the public in to pick for them that way. But really, it's a public effort at this point. We do collect seed over at General Andrews. We have staff members over there that do collection over there. Um, but it's mainly the public and what we can get in for that.
Okay. I know my neighbors contacted me one time, and they wanted to harvest jack pine cones on our property. And so we let them. They came out with ladders and buckets and pruners and would go up, as high as they could get with their little ladders. And I don't know how many bushels they picked, but they seemed very excited to be collecting the jack pine from our property. It says, will you take spruce cones that are, this is from Kathy, will you take spruce cones that are on the shore of Lake Superior?
Um, that is a good question. There is kind of a lake effect. So we don't collect right on the North Shore up there. Um, I'm not as well versed in that as the folks up there in that area. Um, but there is a lake effect that happens up there that doesn't happen anywhere else in the States. So,
Okay. Um, Deb wants to know what is the pick time for jack pine?
um, I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me. That information is on our website, but we do take jack pine through the winter, um, and we are seeing some jack pine come into the nursery now. So it's kind of ripening at different times across the state.
And I think the fire dependency on jack pine, the cones are going to hold together longer than some of
Hmm.
the other species.
Yep.
Um, Nancy says, this is my first awareness or introduction to picking programs. Is there anyone I could join or shadow the process so I can get started?
So there are a few that I know of. We do have the Women's Woodland Network that does come out and pick over at General Andrews. They've done that a couple of times. The Nature Conservancy also has some picking workshops and information coming through there. We also like will provide any information from the nursery that's helpful. And anybody is also welcome to come out to the nursery and kind of see what we're looking for if they're interested in that. Our outreach department is also a great resource for information. So,
Very nice. Uh, Jeff wanted to know if Sarah, could you please share your career journey that brought you to the DNR and any advice for someone that would like to pursue a job in forestry?
okay. Um, I am originally from Idaho. My career journey kind of started in the vegetable seed department. I went to school for agricultural economics, and then I kind of got started in the vegetable seed industry and quality testing there. And then I kind of made a really wide career move and went to Miami. And then I worked in the flower seed industry, and I also got my master's degree in seed biology and technology. um, and then I made the move up here to Minnesota, where my family is originally from. So that's kind of, I kind of went around the US a little bit. Uh, I would recommend if you're wanting to get started with the DNR is any intern opportunities or part-time jobs just to kind of get into the DNR and kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. Our Minnesota Careers website has a lot of information and a lot of job postings um, to kind of get in there. If you're wanting to be a forester, I would recommend schools that are heavy in that kind of uh, offering. I'm not a forester. I came from an ag background, so I mean it's possible not to have a forestry degree to get into forestry. It's just depends on how you want to go.
Wow, you went from farming vegetables to farming trees.
Yep,
Nice.
my dad is in the lumber industry, so at least we're kind of in the same family.
There you
So
go.
yeah.
Mary says, how do folks figure out the right forester to contact for the
Um,
area they're interested in
okay.
picking?
So our website on our website there is a map that I showed in the presentation, and it's kind of an interactive map. And the pins will, if you click on the little round red pins, it'll open up where that forestry office is in the kind of area, and it'll give you the contact information on who you want to talk to. There's also it's also written out, I believe, in just like word form instead of using the map, and it'll list like buying stations and areas and the contact information there.
Very good. Um, Susan wants a little bit of information on, do you pick all the seeds off the trees except for acorns? Can you?
So, yes and no. So we do have pickers that utilize squirrel caching. So Norway
Yeah.
pine is also is one of those. So the squirrels will cut the cones and bring them down and cache them somewhere for the winter time. And so if you find those, you can collect cones from there, as long as they're still of good quality. And then uh, I recommend putting something there like some dog food or something to replace what you're taking from the squirrel so that they do have a little bit of food for the winter as well. I just feel bad if you just take their food, but um, so that's that option as well. Also like topping trees, so cutting off branches and then just pulling the cones off is a thing as well. And instead of picking directly like off a ladder and on against the tree. Um, but I would check regulations on whether you can do that in certain areas before you do it.
Okay. Jason's comment, is DNR still limited in the number of trees, shrubs they can sell each year? If so, what is that number, and do you anticipate that number will be increased?
So right now the cap is 10 million. I believe there's been a little, my brain's trying to think. Sorry, there's been a little bit of some legislative movement, but if my memory serves me correctly, it's 10 million. Right now we're only producing 4 to 5 million. We're kind of bouncing back from the COVID year when we couldn't have anybody here at the nursery kind of working. And we are ramping up production to that goal. But I do anticipate in the future that we would like to produce more or work with other local areas to kind of or other growers in the areas to kind of achieve that goal.
Good deal. So Matthew was wondering if there was any need for less dominant species like yellow birch.
Yes, there is a huge need for that as well. Right now we're getting yellow birch from 2 trees out of 2 harbors, and that's about it. So if you have good quality yellow birch, we'll definitely take it.
Interesting. Would a DNR forester need to come out and verify that the seeds, cones can be collected in a forest?
Um, it would be beneficial to call the office and just tell them kind of what your plan is before you go do it, because there are some areas where you can't collect. But depending on the information that you can give to the forester, it maybe doesn't need a forester to come out to a location.
Do you sell, Amy wants to know, do you sell saplings to the public, or are they only put into forests?
We do sell seedlings to the public. We do open that to the public mid-October. It's kind of our goal this year. We're finishing up inventory to know what's available for the public.
Very good. Brenda says, to clarify, the red pine on the seed zone collection map are areas, it just jumped on me, are areas where one could drop off seeds they're picked, not describing the area where it's okay for people to pick or harvest. So you're probably going to want to work on public lands or private lands with permission, because if you don't have permission, you could be trespassing on somebody's property and maybe they don't want their cones picked.
Yep.
Let's see here. This is from Rachel, does the nursery ever offer group tours or work with local nonprofits like Audubon to bring people out and educate folks?
We do. If we have any interest in anybody wanting to tour the nursery, we are more than happy to bring them out. We do work with, we've had schools come out and tour the nursery. We have local soil and waters come out. We also have some homeschooling programs that come out and kind of see what's going on. So we are more than welcoming to have people come out and see what we do here. It's kind of a unique thing, and we like to share it with people.
Yeah. So what's the average age of the seedlings that you sell?
3 years old,
Three.
if they're a conifer, and 1 to 2 years old if they are a deciduous tree.
Okay. So 30 red pine. That's a pretty good sized tree, isn't it?
Yep, anywhere from 5 to 10 inches or 12 inches tall,
Yep.
depending on the species.
Okay, I just had a question from Cassie. Vince was a little late in getting into the webinar, but would like to plant about 100 white pine seeds, seedlings maybe. Um, how do you do this?
Um, so like how to plant them? That
I'm not sure if he wants to plant, collect the seeds and sprinkle them out, or if he wants to actually get seedlings. I've never, I've planted a lot of trees, and they were all that, seedling size, and you just push a bar into the ground and create an opening, put the tree in, and then pull it back up to the root collar, and then you press the soil back around that bare root stalk. But seeds, I mean, is that advisable for the average person to collect white pine seeds and plant them out?
it's possible. You would want to germinate them, and then what I see most people do is they germinate them in like maybe a piece of paper or a towel with some water, and then they put them in kind of a pot, and then they transplant them from a pot to the ground once they're big enough. You can also just sprinkle seed out there. The survivability rate of that maybe not so good, especially depending on your field prep. If it's just kind of a grassy area, then the grass is probably going to choke out that seed because it's pretty
Hmm.
tiny. And then if you are planting a seedling, like you mentioned, I would recommend some field prep, kind of maybe kill the grass around it so that there's not so much competition. Because some species are a little bit less drought tolerant than others, especially when they're a little baby tree. And then if you do have bare root seedlings, I would recommend when you're putting them down in the hole that you're planting to make sure that the root is going down and it doesn't J root itself back up. Because
Yep.
you might not see that it's not planted right for the first year or two, but then in maybe 3 years, you're going to see the root come up out of the ground, and then there's not much you can do about it at that point.
Hmm. That's why we would push the seedling down into the hole you created, and then
Yep.
you would pull it back up so it straightened out the roots. Um, but yeah, that's really interesting stuff. If you're interested in this kind of conservation, you can reach out. And what's the smallest lot number of trees that you would sell to an individual?
Our minimum order this year would be 300, in increments of 100. So, I mean, you can have 3 different species of 100, but you'll still need 300.
So if you're going to order trees, 300's more than a weekend's worth of work. We are about 15 minutes left, so we can take a couple more questions if anybody comes in. Sarah, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing all your knowledge with us today on seed collection and some of the other stuff that we kind of perused as far as planting and whatnot.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
yeah, Vince just put a question into Cassie again. He wants to know how deep you would plant the seeds.
Oh, good. Depends. It depends on the species. My brain is trying to think, but we're talking about white pine,
White
right?
pine, yeah.
Um, I have to look at my manual, but I want to say it's probably my like 2 to 3 inches deep. That's how deep you'd want to go.
3 might be kind of deep.
Yeah.
Um, when you think nature just lets those seeds disperse and
Hmm.
they fall to the earth, they they end up growing their root structure down into the soil.
Yep.
But
But you don't want it too shallow, and then the wind will blow it away. So
right,
yeah. So probably more like the 1 to 2 inches.
yeah, that sounds pretty good. Um, so I want to thank everybody for joining us. Next week is episode 182, and Cassie just said there's another question. Do you collect from state forests, or can you collect from state forests?
I know like you can't collect from Itasca State Park.
Okay.
Um, So I think that might be more of a question for the areas that you're picking in.
Yep, I'd contact your area forester and say, can we pick on this state forest? And they'll let you know whether it's open or closed to that activity. But let's talk about next week here a little bit. We're managing Minnesota moose. I think that's going to be a really good topic. And we got a couple of speakers lined up to come in and talk. Cassie just put the link in for registering for upcoming MOS programs. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us. Sarah, awesome job. You're welcome to come back and talk about the next topic that you can think of
Awesome.
and share some more information with our audience. With that, Cassie, I think you can take us back to the green room.